Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out why do American houses suck compared to British houses.
So there I was last week scrolling through one of those cozy British cottage Instagram accounts. You know, the ones where everything looks like it was built by hobbits with really good taste in stonework.
It looks fake.
And I had a realization. A lot of American homes are made from wood. Not necessarily in Florida, we typically use concrete blocks due to the hurricanes, but across the country, it's very traditional for American homes to be built with timber. And not like reclaimed barn wood with character, just regular wood, 2x4s and plywood, and whatever engineered lumber product they had on sale at Home Depot in 2003. The walls in these homes are basically very expensive cardboard held together with drywall screws, and yet somehow it works. And this seemed completely normal to me until I started thinking about it. Because do you know what British houses are made of? Brick or stone. These are houses built by people who looked at a rock and thought, yes, this is the option. This will outlast my entire bloodline. Let's go for it. Europeans often think it's so strange that Americans build with mostly timber. But why do we build our houses with wood? And more importantly, why do other countries think this is completely insane? Now let's start with the obvious answer, which is also the most American answer.
Y'all be sure to go to Girl Gone London and like and subscribe. We do have brick houses. Like, they're around. They don't stand up to earthquakes very well. Why do we use wood? Probably because it's cheaper and it'll fall apart quicker, so then we gotta buy another house. We gotta get it repaired. Keeps the economy going.
Now let's start with the obvious answer, which is also the most American answer possible. We had a lot of trees, like an embarrassing amount of trees. When the first European settlers started showing up, something like 950 million acres of what would become the US was covered in forest. That's roughly half the entire landmass. The early colonists took one look at the situation and thought, well, this seems like a building material that will never be a problem, which in hindsight was both completely right and a little bit wrong, but we'll get to that. Now compare this to Britain, where by the time serious house building was happening, they'd already chopped down most of their forests to build ships for the Royal Navy. The Brits had already moved on to stone and brick by necessity. And of course there's plenty of other reasons, so the British build with brick firstly because of the dampness.
Oh, the British used a lot of the wood for shipbuilding. I didn't even think about that. That makes sense, though. Oh, was she saying something about the temperature? Oh, dampness.
Of other reasons. So the British build with brick firstly because of the dampness. Britain is a damp climate overall, and wood construction isn't great for that. But brick is perfectly suited to this climate. Because brick has this thing called thermal mass, which is engineer speak for it takes a really long time to heat up and it takes a really long time to cool down. In America, we solve temperature control by pumping conditioned air through our houses. The British approach is more like, what if the walls themselves were the climate control system?
Hey, yeah. You know, I've always, not always, but I've often thought, why don't we live underground? For just that reason. Like, just dig a hole in the ground. I think in some places the water table's too high, so it would be too damp. But a lot of the time, we could live like hobbits, right? In the side of a hill? Wouldn't that be great? No windows, I guess. But we could have skylights. I don't know. Just brainstorming here.
Those thick brick walls absorb heat during the day and slowly release it at night. They absorb coolness at night and slowly release it during the day. And in a climate where the temperature swings are relatively mild, but the humidity is constant, this actually makes sense. And brick doesn't care about water. Rain hits a brick wall and basically just slides off. Water gets into mortar joints and sits there until it evaporates. You can pressure wash a brick house with a fire hose, and the most dramatic thing that will happen is your bricks will get clean. Here's where it gets really interesting from a safety perspective. Brick doesn't burn. Like, at all. You can take a blowtorch to a brick, no problem. The Great Fire of London in 1666 basically taught the British that building entire cities out of flammable materials was not the best long-term strategy.
Yeah, that's an issue here in California. It's about to be a La Nina year, which means it's going to be extra dry, which means we're going to have fires, probably again. Whole neighborhoods could be wiped out. And I think in Los Angeles, they don't often build with brick because of earthquakes. It takes a little extra engineering, I think, to get that to work. I think. Is that right? Hang on. I might be talking out my ass. Let me just see. Is brick construction good for earthquakes? No. Standard unreinforced brick construction is not good for earthquakes because brick is a brittle material, and the mortar holding it together is weak against the forces of an earthquake, leading to cracking, crumbling, and collapse. However, reinforced brick construction can perform well, adding steel reinforcement bars or other material to the walls and anchoring them to the roof and floors makes the structure more flexible and resistant to seismic forces. What is the best construction material for earthquakes? There's no single best construction for material for earthquakes, rather a combination of materials and design techniques focusing on ductility, ability to deform without breaking, and flexibility. Steel reinforced concrete. That's what we need, steel reinforced concrete. And wood framed construction. No, we can't have that. It'll light on fire. I have one more question. Are there earthquakes in Britain? Surely there are some, right? Are there earthquakes in Britain? Most earthquakes occur on the western side of the British mainland. Earthquakes are almost completely absent from eastern Scotland and northeast England. Very good.
Meanwhile, American timber houses are basically kindling held together with good intentions and American optimism. We've got wood framing, wood sheathing, wood flooring, wood trim, wood cabinets. It's like we're actively trying to create the most flammable structure possible while still meeting building codes. And America, as you've probably seen, does have issues with devastating wildfires. However, remember, there's a why to everything. Because you know what many states that have to contend with wildfires also have to contend with? Oh yes, earthquakes and other natural disasters that do impact what we build with, but more on that later. Now here's where it gets interesting, and by interesting, I mean reveals something about American psychology. In Britain, if you're building a house, you're building it for your great-great-grandchildren, and maybe their great-great-grandchildren. These are people who have pubs that have been continuously operated since before Columbus got lost looking for India. When a Brit builds a house, they're building it to last until, like, the heat death of the universe. Americans, on the other hand, we build houses like we build everything else. Fast, cheap, and with the assumption that we'll probably want to tear it down and build something different in 30 years anyway. And timber construction is fast. You can frame an entire timber house in a few days if you know what you're doing. A brick house takes weeks or months of careful laying, pointing, and weatherproofing. It's a whole thing. And Americans have always been in a hurry. We had a whole continent to fill up, and we needed to do it before someone else did. The British approach of let's build this house to withstand warfare doesn't work when you need to house thousands of people streaming west every year. And let's talk money, because everything in America and the world eventually comes down to money. Timber framing is cheap. Like, really cheap compared to the alternatives. A 2x4 stud costs maybe $3. The equivalent amount of structural brickwork costs far more. And we're so committed to this cheapness that we've built an entire industry around making cheap houses last just long enough to not be embarrassing. There's also something called mass timber, or engineered timber. This is a class of wood that has been manufactured for building construction specifically. They use lumber bonded with adhesives or mechanical fasteners to create this building option that allows for even faster construction times, as well as far better weathering than regular wood. Mass timber actually has structural properties more similar to steel or concrete, and they're more naturally fire resistant. You can build high-rise buildings in America up to 18 stories tall using mass timber.
18 stories tall of wood? Really? That's surprising. What is the tallest wooden structure in the world? Sure. Wooden buildings that have exceptional height. There's one in Poland. Oh, the tallest freestanding human construction wooden structure in the world, though not a building, is the Gilwis Radio Tower. Okay. I'm not going to count that. Okay. Maybe not structure. Let's look for wooden building. That's made of timber? It's 25 stories high. It's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's officially the tallest mass timber building in the world. This is timber? Cross-laminated timber hybrid. Okay. Wow. Oh, now this looks... I can visualize this. I've seen several condos go up in Los Angeles where the bottom few floors are concrete and the top few floors are wood. I have seen this before. Very interesting.
You can build high-rise buildings in America up to 18 stories tall using mass timber. And speaking of building codes, let's talk about them, because it seems like wooden homes would be far flimsier than brick homes, but jokes aside, American building codes are insanely specific about timber construction. This isn't the same wooden structure that your kids build in the woods when you're camping. We've got rules for everything: how far apart the studs can be, what grade of lumber you can use, how many nails per connection point, what kind of foundation, etc. And it works. American wood frame houses, when they're built to code, are actually pretty sturdy. They flex in earthquakes instead of crumbling. They're easy to insulate. You can run electrical and plumbing through the walls without needing a demolition crew. It's just that they feel temporary in a way that drives people from other cultures absolutely insane. And that's when I started thinking about something deeper here, something that goes just beyond we had trees, so we use them. Americans are just weirdly okay with things not lasting forever. We've internalized this idea that everything is temporary, everything is replaceable, and everything can and should be upgraded. This drives my...
Are we? I mean, when she says that, I think, yeah, everything is temporary. But yeah, no, I mean, everything is temporary. It's just a matter of time before everything in this room that I'm in is gone, eroded by whatever, knocked over by a nuclear blast maybe, burned up. It's all temporary. But really, if you keep looking down into it, it's all energy, and like my two fingers aren't even really touching. There's an electrical force between them that I'm feeling, right? Or is there even that? My perception is all being filtered to my brain. Like, it's all temporary. This whole world is temporary. Okay. I'm sober, I promise. I just had a little existential crisis.
European friends absolutely crazy. They live in apartments and houses that are older than our entire country. The idea that you build a house that isn't absolutely maximized for lasting as long as possible is bizarre. Let's zoom out for a minute and look at what American wood construction enabled. Suburbia. You cannot build American suburbia with stone and brick. You just can't. The economics of it don't work. I'm not...
I don't know. I see a lot of brick houses. I guess maybe they're not all brick, like they're brick and wood. But no, I guess for the expanses of all of suburbia, you gotta have the trees.
Suburbia with stone and brick. You just can't. The economics of it don't work. I'm not saying you can't build new housing developments with brick. Obviously you can. The Brits do it all the time.
This is reminding me of a video she just did about roofs. Roofs. Where the British use slate and more hard things, more expensive materials, and Americans use like treated paper, like sandpaper. Sometimes corrugated steel or tin or terracotta tiles, but often just that paper.
But American suburban sprawl is another thing entirely in the sheer number of homes and scale required. Suburban sprawl in America is basically a side effect of cheap timber construction. Americans made housing so cheap that we could afford to spread out over enormous distances, which meant we needed cars to get anywhere, which meant we needed parking lots, which meant we needed more roads, which meant we needed to spread out even more. And American timber homes do have advantages that brick homes don't. Firstly, they're more flexible. Want to knock out a wall to make an open concept living space? Pretty easy.
Right.
Need to add an electrical outlet? Just fish the wire through the wall cavity and you're done. And this means American culture is to renovate their houses constantly. We treat home renovation like a hobby.
Oh my God. That is so true. I remember when that show, what was it called? You know what I'm talking about. Where they give away $1 million house. I don't know. I don't remember what it's called. But there's so many TV shows about renovating homes, and they do it to an extreme amount. They're really popular. People love that.
There are entire television networks dedicated to people tearing apart houses and basically rebuilding them slightly differently.
HGTV?
If something goes wrong with a wood house, you can usually fix it without calling a specialized craftsman or ordering materials from some far-flung destination. Home Depot has everything you need to repair pretty much any wood house problem, and YouTube often has videos showing you how to do it. And it's warm. timber frame houses with good insulation are pretty cozy. And as we've talked about, it's extremely possible with building codes to build a timber house that is incredibly sturdy. It might not be as long lasting as brick, but it's not going anywhere anytime soon. Then you've got large regions of America, particularly along the West Coast, which experience earthquakes. And this brings me back to my point about why it might seem confusing to some people that places like California, who are prone to wildfires, are still often built with timber. And the reason is because wood flexes and moves and can handle earthquake seismic activity far better than brick. In fact, concrete and brick used to be big building materials on the West Coast, but after the 1933 Long Beach earthquake, they had to make a change.
I've heard of that. 1933 Long Beach earthquake. 1933 Long Beach earthquake. Magnitude 6.4. It caused 120 deaths and widespread destruction in Southern California, especially in Long Beach and Compton. The disaster led to the California Field Act, which established stricter building codes for public schools, and it remains a landmark event in earthquake history. I think the strongest earthquake I've been through has been like a 4.7 or 4.8, and it's scary. Like, it's just enough shaking to make you wonder if you're going to die.
At the time, many school buildings were made with brick because it was seen as a better investment. But 70 schools completely collapsed and even more were heavily damaged.
70?
The earthquake hit at 5 p.m. If it had hit a few hours earlier, thousands of children's lives would have been in danger. And so officials looked at the buildings that did survive, and it found that the wooden buildings did quite well. Now, not all of America is built with timber. The Southwest has stucco, which works well in a desert climate, and as I mentioned, Florida often builds with concrete cinder blocks to withstand hurricane force winds. There are some cities in the US that do use structural brick more often, like Chicago, Cincinnati, and Houston, but the vast majority of American housing, if we're talking about most states and most of suburbia, is wood frame construction with vinyl siding and those asphalt shingles. And contrary to popular belief, these homes can last for hundreds of years. Not to mention they're built on concrete foundations, so it's not quite a page out of the Three Little Pigs story where the house is simply going to fall down. It's unusual in the UK though to build with wood, and this is just another one of those areas where our countries differ. That brings me to the end of this video. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Y'all be sure to go to Girl Gun London and like and subscribe. That was interesting. See, the title of this video is Why Do American Houses Suck Compared to British Houses? That's a little extreme. That's a little extreme. I wouldn't say they suck. They're made appropriate for the location. Hopefully. Right? Where do British bricks come from? Where do British bricks come from? British bricks historically came from local clay sources, but a significant portion is now imported from countries like the Netherlands and Belgium due to domestic production struggles and high demand. Traditionally, the clays used, such as London's brick earth and the Cretaceous clays of Surrey, Sussex, and Kent, dictated brick type. Modern import patterns show a shift in sourcing, with European countries supplying a large quantity of bricks for the UK market. Well, Netherlands and Belgium. A surge in housing market activity after 2014 to 15 created a significant demand that outstripped domestic production. Domestic brick production capacity has not kept pace with the increased demand, making imports essential. The UK's reliance on imported bricks has a historical context, with early post-Roman bricks being imported from Flemish and Dutch craftsmen. Whoa, yeah, I bet a wooden house in Britain would probably get moldy. It would probably be wet all the time. I guess you could coat it in something, put vinyl siding on it, or, I don't know, probably get moldy. Mold! Well, y'all, I'd like to thank my patrons. I'd like to thank my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank y'all for watching this with me, and I'll see you next time. Later.